I am Michael Caine.
Michael Caine plays a maniac who switches from talking very softly, like Michael Caine, to screaming about the bees. Could you beat the villain? Could I beat a mega swarm of murder bees, which almost happened in 2020? Yes, I could. And unlike the people in the film, I'm not going to poison the ecosystem or burn down an entire city. These bees are South American. The bees don't like the cold, that's even mentioned in the film. So what I would do is lure the bees into one location, like a big old office building or a stadium, something like that. Turn the temperature right down, wait for the bees to go into hibernation, hit them with a big newspaper, something like that. I don't know, I haven't worked it all out yet. But basically, my plan doesn't involve burning down the entirety of Houston. How would you improve this film? The film is 2.5 hours long, and if you cut out all the small town, romantic hospital, soap opera bullshit, it wouldn't be. There's a whole plot about a doctor who appears to be in love with a pregnant woman whose boyfriend was just killed by some bees. And that goes nowhere. And there's a whole love triangle between a school teacher, a shopkeeper, and a cowboy. And it goes nowhere because they die in a train crash. There's a cold open that goes on too long. And why would you zoom in on an Air Force person typing in some keypad code thing if you can actually zoom in and see he's not pressing any buttons on the keypad? I assume most of the people in this film were not hired because of their acting abilities, moreover their ability to remain still whilst covered in bees. And my favourite was the helicopter pilot who lost a dogfight with some bees and started screaming,
"Oh my God, bees, millions of bees! Air search 2-8 for base. Bees, millions of bees! Bees? Yes, they're all around me now. All over the canopy, trying to get here. Well, get above them, man. Take it up. I can't, sir. I am losing power. Oh my God!
Michael Caine is a civilian and he's an expert on bees, and he just so happens to be around this secret intercontinental ballistic missile site when some bees attack everyone there. And he just so happens to walk through an open door and get into like the sub-level, even though the doors were not open when the Air Force turned up and they discovered him. And he just so happens to have a file and all the experts you would need to combat the bees. And he's got a pouch full of sunflower seeds. And there's a general in this who straight up does not trust Michael Caine, which is rational. And he tells a major, look, keep your eye on Michael Caine, alright? He's clearly up to something, I don't trust him, get me a dossier on this guy. And the major takes his eyes off Michael Caine, and he shouldn't have done, but then the general's like, you know what, that dossier, you don't need to compile it anymore, because Michael Caine, the scientist, believes in God. No. Michael Caine, in my opinion, in this film, is either some sort of wasp monster who's pretending to be human, that's why he's mental, or he's an alien. One of those two things, I don't know. Paul, he's a sweet little child in this film. His parents say his name about 10 times in the one scene in which they're alive. And there is an impressive long shot of 3 people talking, Michael Caine being one of them, I think maybe the general and someone else. And it circles around them, and it's like, it's a very impressive shot, but it's a boring bit of the story, nothing's going on. Michael Caine has got a love interest in this film. She's a doctor lady who works for the Air Force. He and her walk into this small town hospital where Paul, the kid whose parents were brutally murdered by bees, Paul's being treated, and the doctor there, I'm pretty sure he's either shaking Paul or he's pinning him to the bed, and he's screaming in his face because apparently everything that doctor had done to try and calm Paul down had not worked.
Get him out of here, please! Get him away!
Doctor, would you let him go? Let him go.
Do what he says to us.
Back away.
It feels like they walked in on a crime and he was like, yeah, I was just trying to calm him down. Michael Caine says to Paul, there's no bee in here, You're having a nightmare. First off, Michael Caine, Paul is not asleep. He is awake. He's hallucinating. Second off, why do the people who are stung by bees in this film hallucinate giant bees? That's never explained. They go to the scene where Paul's parents got brutally murdered by the bees, and they find one dead bee. How is that a thing? Because I thought the bees, they died when they stung you, because their stinger breaks.
My name is Michael Caine.
But then Paul, when he's fleeing the scene, he's in a car, the window wipers are going, there are bees on the window. Surely at least one of those bees, or two of those bees, got killed by the wipers, but apparently not. The Air Force do not come off well in this film, and surely they must have had a hand in it, because there's a lot of, Air Forcey stuff. But basically, Michael Caine, a civilian and a maniac, screams in their faces all the time, and he takes over their operations. Alright, that's just the story. But then some hillbilly water engineer guy also walks all over them, so I was like, why are they not projecting themselves as having a backbone? We've been losing the war against the insects for 15 years, but I never thought it would be the bees. They've always been our friend, said Michael Caine. No, they haven't, Michael Caine. Humans have been stealing the honey of the bees for many, many years now. That doesn't seem like a friendly thing. If anything, we've been provoking the bees for too long. Dr. Connors is the kind of Pentagon scientist or White House scientist who convinces the president to give Michael Caine authority over this situation. And then when Dr. Connors shows up, he's like, Michael Caine, I don't trust you. Did he give the authority to the president or tell the president? Or has Michael Caine somehow engineered it so that he's like forged a letter, posted it to the president, and then the real Dr. Connors doesn't know anything about it because he doesn't like Michael Caine? Michael Caine orders that Air Force major who's supposed to be keeping a dossier on him to turn on and off a projector, even though Michael Caine is that far away from it. That's a power move. He's going mad with power. And it's around this time in the film where Michael Caine is talking to one of the scientists, and the scientist's like, well, actually, you keep calling them African bees, but they're South American. And Michael Caine starts screaming at them. He's like, he knows they're technically South African bees, but he will call them South American bees, but he will call them African bees. And you start hearing phrases like, oh, we've got to stop the Africans, and we can't let the Africans reach the city, and it's a war against the Africans. And you start to wonder if it's really about the bees, and if there are some dark tones to this film. Paul, the little kid, him and his friends go and look at the swarm of bees that murdered his parents. Grim. And they use some binoculars from about 15 feet away. And Michael Caine says, look, the bees are heading for Maryville. They're heading in two different directions though. Some of the bees are going somewhere else. Why would you introduce more characters, like the reporters at the town, like an hour into the film, and have those characters do nothing and go nowhere? Doesn't make any sense. Who set the alarm off in the town? So Michael Caine runs into the police station. He's like, Jesus Christ, the bees are coming. And then all of a sudden the kind of air raid siren's going off, and everyone knows the bees are on. But I don't think we saw any of the police officers go, oh, okay, I'll press a button and do the air raid siren. Weird. So that school teacher who's in the love triangle, she tells these two grown men that by the end of the school year, she'll tell which one of them she prefers and which one she's going to like shack up with. Which is strange. And then she gets the word that, oh no, the killer bees are coming. And she goes on the school PA tannoy thing. She's like, children and teachers, I want you to come inside and be okay, because the bees are on their way. No, the bees are already there. There are some dead kids, like already outside when she's giving that announcement. Having said that, that was good acting of hers when she was looking out the window, looking at those dead kids. She looked distressed.
I am Michael Caine.
This is more of my theory that Michael Caine is either a wasp or a group of wasps disguised as human or an alien. Michael Caine is the only person in this entire film who is around multiple swarms of bees, or multiple bees from the same swarm, is not stung. So there's a bit where he's in the town and he and the love interest doctor lady, they break into a restaurant, endangering the people who are already there. And she's stung and he isn't. And then at the end of the film, they're in Houston, having burned most of it down. He protects her with a blanket, very noble. He doesn't even try and protect himself. And the bees, I'm not going to say they ignore him, but it seems like they fear him because he's a wasp. Michael Caine asks for some ice to, make the bee wound that the love interest doctor lady's got cold. And the woman in the restaurant has already got a cup full of it. He's like, give me some ice, quickly. That was weird. There's a guy in the restaurant as well who basically is like, screw you guys, I'm going to lock myself in the freezer and protect myself. Oh look, the cold, the bees don't like it. Maybe you could use that later in the film, but they don't. Anyway, he had to be absolutely sure that the other 3 people he locked out of the freezer and left to the bees were going to die. Otherwise, that is just very, very awkward, isn't it? 200 people die in the attack on the town, which was caused by Paul and his friends throwing Molotov cocktails at the bees for revenge for Paul's parents, Paul is directly responsible for these people dying, and he confesses that to Michael Caine. And I thought Michael Caine, because he's been screaming in people's faces a lot, I thought he was going to belt the kid, but he didn't. He was very understanding. He was like, Paul, I would have done the same thing, because my family died in a fire. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You probably wouldn't have used fire on the bees if your family has died in a fire when you were a kid, but alright. The major, he's talking to the general, he's like, look, this Michael Caine guy, he's insane. I don't think we should be listening to him. And the general is clearly being affected by whatever alien/wasp magic Michael Caine is using, because the general calls the major an arsehole for talking behind someone's back. The teacher and the shop guy and the cowboy, they're on this train, which is about to crash and end several storylines that were all a waste of time. Either the shop guy or the cowboy, I can't remember which, say to the teacher, oh, what's wrong? What's going on? Why are you so sad? Either earlier that day or yesterday, she, a teacher, saw a bunch of dead kids at the school she works in. What do you think's wrong? Come on, man. Right, yeah, so I'm pretty sure in the scene where Michael Caine and other people are concerned about the ecological impact of trying to poison the bees, they drop a load of styrofoam balls into the woods, and the ecological impact we'll come back to later. Why do people who get stung by the bees seem to get better than relapse? What's with these magical killer bees? There's a doctor who hits on the pregnant lady whose boyfriend died because of the bee attack as she's coming out of the delivery room. He's got to pick his time better. That is just disgraceful. I do respect the fact that Paul dies in this film, and I am confused as to why they didn't try and revive Paul, the child, because I know CPR had been invented when this film came out. Doctor lady, she says to Michael Caine, why didn't you tell me the patients at the base who were getting better died? And he's like, well, you had other things on your mind. You had other problems. I think my Michael Caine impression is getting worse. A, she is a doctor. Those were her patients. You should have told her. B, she has also been stung by a bee and is feeling better. You should have told her. There's a nurse who rudely ignores Michael Caine in this film. I think she knows that he's some sort of weird alien wasp monster. Henry Fonda, Dr. Krim. I like the cut of his jib, even though he might be faking being in a wheelchair for some sort of disability benefits. He says, oh man, what's a man got to do to get a beer and a pizza in this joint? He also decides to test his bee anti-poison on himself, and I think no one survived more than 3 bee stings, so he decides to go straight up. I'm going to inject myself with the venom of 6 bees, see if I can pull it off. He dies, which is sad and predictable, but the love interest doctor lady, she's got a terrible bedside manner, because I was like, oh no, he's in trouble. Runs off and gets help, leaves him to die. And then there's another completely unqualified doctor who, bear in mind, Henry Fonda's Dr. Krim has strapped himself to a heart monitor as part of his experiment that killed him. And he's like in his wheelchair like, And this guy comes up to him with a stethoscope, boom, ears in, listens to him. No, he's dead. Yeah, he's strapped to a heart monitor. You can see he's dead. What's wrong with you? So Dr. Connors, he goes to a nuclear power plant because he's argued against the people who run it before, because he's, thinks they're bad for the environment. So he's got a connection with them, but it's a terrible connection. And the scientist man who runs the place, he's like, don't worry, we've got loads of fail-safes in place. The power plant's going to be okay. And Dr. Connors is like, oh yeah? Have any of your fail-safes taken into consideration killer bees? No, fucking obviously they haven't. It's a power plant. Anyway, that leads directly onto the power plant. It goes bad because there were no fail-safes in place for the killer bees, and 36,000 people die. And I can only imagine that they all died in slow motion like Dr. Connors. And that leads me to believe too many people in this film die in slow motion because of bees. Because all those thousands of people died, the president and the military are like, look, Michael Caine, you fucked up too many times. All right, too many people have died now. We're taking this over. But for some reason, the general who's in charge, who didn't really like Michael Caine, but the wasp magic is working on him, now just lets Michael Caine stroll about and do whatever he wants anyway. There is a needlessly long amount of time watching Michael Caine and the love interest go in an escalator and up a lift when they're at the new HQ in Houston, soon to be burnt down. Michael Caine says, I was afraid of this. They've become immune to any form of pesticide. Really, Michael Caine? Because you haven't mentioned it once in the entire film. I don't think you did think this was going to happen. I'm going to come out and say it. Those guys with the flamethrowers, I think they were just burning stuff for the fun of it. I don't think they were aiming for the bees. The love interest doctor lady, she says to Michael Caine, you haven't had 8 hours sleep in weeks. How long has this film been going on for? Because I thought it was a couple of days. Bees, not only can they take out a helicopter and murder people and stuff, they can also block radio signals, it would seem. And you see a couple of dead soldiers on the floor, or Air Force men probably, on the floor with flamethrowers, and they've still got their fingers on the trigger, and that seems like a design flaw to me. That's asking for trouble. The general, he already has about 300 bees on him when he starts to die. It was very strange. After the plan of burning down Houston doesn't kill all the bees, Michael Caine, who was concerned about the ecological impact of something before, decides that what they need to do is create an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, lure the bees out there, and then blow it all to shit. And that is what they do. So I assume he was concerned about the ecosystem on land, where wasps live, but, the sea can get fucked, basically. Michael Caine comes up with this plan to use these alarm, which allegedly attracted the bees to the ICBM site in the first place, straps them to some helicopters, although they don't seem to, some speakers, they don't seem to play the sound through the speakers at the helicopters anyway, just in the buoys they dump in the sea. That's besides the point. But the love interest, she goes, won't the noise of the helicopters drown out your sound? And he says, no, it's an entire different sonic level. That seems like bullshit. That doesn't make any sense. The exploding Gulf of Mexico is somehow behind Michael Caine and the love interest in close-up, even though in the wide shots they are standing parallel to it. Rating out of 5 beers. Paul and his friends, you know what? I would like to have seen Paul dies, and rightly so because of karma, because he killed those 200 people. I would like to see his friends who helped him set the bees on fire, some sort of justice against them, maybe a trial after the whole thing has gone down, where they go to jail for multiple life sentences, something like that. And even though I completely hated the fact that the plot line went nowhere, the cowboy and the school teacher did have some funny interactions between each other. My favourite one was, you can tell a lot about a man by the way he shuffles cards. Thank you, Clarence. Wasn't meant to be a compliment. I would give this 4 beers out of 5. I do feel it actually deserves the, one of the worst films ever made title. And I think it won an Academy Award for Best Costuming, even though Michael Caine wears nothing but ugly clothes in this film.
There is no place you can ever call it.
Anyway. What the fuck is that noise? What is that? Oh god, the bees. Yeah.
soul.
My name